Hi, I wanted to show you some stuff that I don't even understand, and I've been kind of looking at this stuff for 20 years. Um, so usually I go to CodePen and I just check out some pens. If you went to CodePen yourself, you would have kind of explored some of these things which come up, and you've got all these different kind of picked pens, and here's your calculator, here's your other things, etc. And they're usually things done by people who are just messing around. Just like when we go and we make a new pen, and we have a little bit of a play. So we'll like make a div, and then we'll put some stuff into it, and we'll close the div, and then we'll write some CSS for it. The CSS might be, I don't know, whatever we've been doing. Like this has a width of 400 pixels. This has a background color of blue, and this has a height of 200 pixels. So we've done things like that, and obviously we can make this a little bit smaller so it's more. Let's make it boxy. Let's make it 4 by 4. Let's change the foreground color of the text, etc. Right? So these are things we can do. We can go in there, we can add some padding, and we can make padding like 30 pixels, and so make it like lots of room around this thing that we're putting in there. And that's what we've been doing. We haven't really messed around with lots of animation stuff. Now, when you get into JavaScript, you can start moving these things around, but it requires programming. So the big deal that's kind of been discussed in CSS circles is that when CSS, because we have CSS version 1, right? Then we had CSS version 2, and now we have CSS version 3. And with each one of these versions, we got more stuff that got added to it. And you have to remember that when I first started doing this stuff in HTML about 20 odd years ago, there was no CSS. CSS only came, 4 or 5 years later, because I started learning HTML when it was version 3, and then I learned version 4, and then they had this XHTML thing which I had to learn, which was version 1, which was really bad, and then XHTML 1.1. You get the idea. What we're doing now is HTML version 5, and there's some really cool stuff in there. But fundamentally what happens with every version is they get bigger and they get extra things added to it, and same with CSS. So some of the cool things that they've done with CSS recently, I'm just going to close out, I'm not going to save it, is they've added a bunch of things around animations. And where do I start? I'll start with this one. So when you create things, and again this is just not being used, so I'm just going to spread this out so we have some room and show you. These are little cool animations, right? And what happens here is beyond me, right? I don't know how this magic works because there is no JavaScript. There's just some CSS magic. And when I say there's some CSS magic, there's these things here, and I'm expecting that one of these, is one of these planets or something, but it's just a line on the planet. So when you remove that, something happened to the first planet, something disappeared potentially. But these are just the actual lines around it. So if we were to get rid of, a bunch of these, right? I don't know what the result of that looks like. I don't know if that updates, but I can see that these lines on the moon have been disappearing. So all of these lines that you see here are these lines that get drawn on top of this. And then there's these moon things, right? So there's this moon at the bottom. And again, I don't know where that is, but if I take it out and then I kind of click away from it, it forces this CodePen to refresh, and there you can see that there's only one moon spinning around. And to be honest, this is how I learnt HTML years and years ago. I had a look at something, I wondered what it did, and then I tried to get rid of it and see what happens. Like, what happens if I remove that? Same as this moon top. If I get rid of the moon top, what happens? Click down the bottom, or click outside of it, have it refresh, and see that there's only one moon now going around. And so these things, I'm not telling you go and geek out for hours and learn this stuff on your own, but I'm just saying there's potential, because anytime you're looking at anything in HTML and CSS, it is a bit of a mystery, but all of the details to unravel the mystery are in front of you. There's no secrets. There's nothing that's kind of hidden in a box, and you can't open it. It's like if you wanted to know how Photoshop works, you can't find out. You can't open up what Photoshop is made of and have a look inside. But with HTML and CSS, you can, and that's why it's really kind of cool. Anyway, the point is that all of these little examples that people share on CodePen is because they've achieved something that they thought was really cool, and I think this is really cool because it's an animation. But then there's all of these different things that they've got. Now this is a different version of CSS. It's got in brackets here that it's SCSS, which allows you to have these little things here, which are variables, which we have never discussed, but you can see there. But what happens is that you can change these little properties. So if we change the gold to FFF, what the result of that is on the actual screen here is that all the lines become white, because what we've specified here is we change that A78247, which is that gold color, to FFF, which is white. And so these are things that you can do. These are variables at the very top that you can modify. And again, I haven't written this, but I'm just having a play with what these things are, and I can see there's a hashtag and a couple of letters and numbers. I know that's a color, so I can just mess around and go, I wonder what this is. I wonder what it would look like as red, and I know that red is F00, and then I basically just type that in and see what happens, and there it is, all the lines are red. So those are things you can do and experiment and you can just play with, but it's really an encouragement to just mess around and have a hack. I'll add all these links anyway that I'm going to show you, so that you can kind of check them out in the description, so you can have a look at that. If you find something on CodePen that's like really awesome and that you think everyone else should check out, put it into the comments as well. I mean, we all love geeking out over this stuff. If you share something cool, then it just saves us time looking for it. And then what we're looking at here in terms of what's happening is there's a bunch of CSS information that specifies how these things are positioned, as well as how they animate. And so there's this whole animation kind of information on how, what happens with the planets and how they kind of work. And I don't know this stuff because I don't animate with CSS, so this is all new things to me. It's a very long file, but because someone's gone to the trouble of creating it, you can see the results of it down here, and you can kind of take it apart and try and understand it. So they're cool things you can do to explore. Again, if you can understand this, you're smarter than me, which is a challenge, so go do it. But it's definitely very cool and very fun. Another thing which blew my mind, which I think is just amazing, is this one, right? So you kind of look at this and go, oh wow, how does this work? There's this read now and there's a magazine there, and you move the mouse over it. Whoa! Right? Did that just happen? Did that magazine just open? And did that page just kind of pop out? Like, I don't know how they did this. It blows my mind that this is possible with CSS, because there's no JavaScript, and we used to only be able to do this kind of stuff with JavaScript. But there's all of this information here, which again is a very long file, that explains how this is happening. What's getting rotated on what kind of axis. This is like math stuff that, again, I'm not going to try and do, but the fact that it's possible, the fact that someone's gone and done this, is what makes it interesting to me, because then you go, wow, there's so many possibilities within CSS. It's just a matter of being able to spend that time and discover what you need to do with it. And then obviously this is my last one I'm going to show off. Again, no JavaScript here. This is for all the Marvel fans in the room who like X-Men and other things like that. These are all the different colors here. So there's Magneto's colors, and there's other character colors. And what you can see is the person here, Ryan here, made all these different animations and kind of drawings of the different X-Men. So that's Professor Xavier, and there's Cyclops, etc., etc. Right? There's Wolverine. So if you kind of look at Wolverine, he's got his claws coming out. So all that kind of stuff, which is really, really cool. And again, all done with some CSS, all specified and where it should be and how it should work and all of that stuff, and then some extra additional information on what the animation should be and how it should transform and what should happen, etc., etc. Very cool stuff. Again, I can't tell you how it works because I don't do this, but it's definitely a whole field in itself of animating in CSS, and the people who are really good at it, they show it off on codepen. They share this stuff for free. You can learn from it if you're interested in it, or you can just share it and geek out like I am. But the point is to really kind of understand that we're all learning, and we're learning what's possible, and then the languages expand. So CSS version 3 is gonna turn into CSS version 4 one day. What's that gonna bring? What other kind of things will we have? So really keep an open mind as you're learning this stuff. You're learning the basics, you're learning how to put together a portfolio site, but you are learning the fundamentals of something much, much bigger, and something that can do a lot for your potential customers or your friends if you're doing things for them. And it can become something a lot of fun. And I guess I'm encouraging you to explore, while also saying, be mindful of time because you still want to get all of your work done. But it is that balance of the two. It's like, what are people doing? Oh wow, that's possible. Great. What's next? What am I going to work on? How am I going to practice some of these things? What can I mess around with here, and how will that affect what's getting shown? So those are all kind of cool things that I just encourage you to do. Again, thanks for joining me. Leave some comments below if you find some cool codepen pens, and I will definitely do something else tomorrow so that we can just keep going forward and learning some stuff. But definitely practice. The more you practice, the more you mess around, the easier this stuff gets. So thanks again. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.